Hello, I'm Chuck Davis, and this is the Distinguished Photographer Series for the month of May 2021. Our speaker tonight is Ken Kaminesky. Ken is a great photographer, and he's been photographing at least 15 or more years. As I read, Ken, you did quite a bit as a professional commercial photographer. Obviously did a number of editorial assignments and worked for agencies which covered your work. I believe that Fujifilm likes you as a photographer as well, and maybe you'll talk about that as we move along. So I turn it over to Ken Kaminesky, our distinguished photographer for May.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be selected to speak tonight to your fine group of photographers. It's always fun to be able to talk a little bit about the story behind the pictures that I'm able to take and give a little bit of insight in what it took in order to be able to get to where I am and the road that I took to get here. So again, thank you so much. I'll move on from the first slide to get to talk a little bit about who I am, and that's always a good place to start. So my name is Ken Kaminesky, not Kaminsky, and that's an extremely common mistake that people make, so no worries, but there is an E in there, and it's Kaminesky. Who am I? I'm a travel photographer, I'm a writer, so I used to much more often write on my blog, which I've put to the side once I started doing more things in the travel sphere, including starting a travel company, Discovery Photo Tours. But I also now am the travel photography columnist for Outdoor Photographer. As it says on the left there, I'm a ex-travel blogger, photography blogger as well. And the biggest passion I have at the moment is really running these tours all over the world, which allows me to share my passion for travel and photography with amateur photographers and get a chance to really get a understanding of what drives them as photographers as well. And so it's always fun to hang out with kindred spirits in some of the most beautiful places in the world. I've been a brand ambassador for many different companies in the photography and travel world, as a spokesperson and a consultant working with them as well. And over the course of the years, I like to consider myself a bit of an entrepreneur as well, not just being pure photographer, but jumping from field to field in photography, and then also culminating with my starting up of Discovery Photo Tours and making that a real center point of what it is that I do with my life. So what do I like to photograph? Well, it's mostly travel icons, historic venues. I'd like to get the big picture of a place. I like to make things look grandiose and beautiful. I like to give my interpretation of a scene more so than trying to be a photojournalist and presenting the reality of it. I always like to say I like to pay homage to the places that I photograph by making them shine in the most beautiful light that I possibly can present them. So some of the clients that I've worked for over the years, and we'll just brush over this really quickly. I was shooting mostly commercial lifestyle fashion type photography at the beginning of my career, and I ended up working for a whole bunch of different companies that I'm really honored to have had the opportunity to work with. When I look back at this kind of a screen and see all these fancy logos, it brings back a lot of nice memories, but it also makes me kind of go, wow, I forgot half of the stuff that I did for all these guys. But it's nice to take a little walk down memory lane like this. And as for the sponsors and partners that I've had, yes, Fujifilm does like me, and I'm very pleased to say that I like them right back. It's been a really wonderful association with Fujifilm over the years. I was an ex-photographer and one of the first ones in the United States when they started producing their really exceptional small APS-C format cameras, and I've never looked back. I'm still a devout Fujifilm user and love everything that they produce, from their really incredible small format cameras which allow me to travel lighter all the way to the GFX, which gives you these amazing medium format digital 100 megapixel files now to work with. And that's just, mind blowing with the technology that's advanced since I started working with Fujifilm. I'm also a big fan of PhotoShelter, and I've worked with them as a consultant and a partner over the last 10 years or so. Format High Tech, I'm really honored to have my own filter kit branded in, their with their filters, and I'll showcase a little bit of that a little bit later. Arc'teryx has been just a wonderful partner for me as well. For someone who works in travel, it's really nice to be able to be dressed warmly and properly against the elements in all sorts of crazy places, including everywhere from the Arctic Circle in Norway all the way down to Antarctica. And Discovery Photo Tours is my baby, a company I'm very proud of and very excited to have had the opportunity to offer these tours all over the world, from places like Jordan, Japan, Myanmar, safaris in Tanzania, expeditions to Antarctica, and more. So when I started writing my blog, I always got inspiration from people who wrote a heck of a lot better than I could, including people like Mark Twain and others. And I always like to throw in quotes into the articles that I was writing. And this is one that's always inspired me. It kind of, I think, gives me a little bit of wind beneath my wings in order to be able to think back of where I was when I started getting into travel, and getting that sense of confidence and excitement for the adventures that only happen once you start, doing exactly that, exploring, dreaming, and discovering. And ever since I started doing that, I've never looked back, and I've never enjoyed photography as much as I do today. So this is where it all began for me. I started back in 1991, assisting other photographers. And as a young photographer, it was really exciting to be able to work with a lot of fashion photographers here in Montreal. It was something that I think most of my friends were extremely jealous of, because I got a chance to hang out with a lot of pretty girls. And that was one of the reasons that fashion photography attracted me a lot. And it wasn't just that, but it was also working with dynamic teams and getting a chance to work with, hairstylists, makeup artists, wardrobe stylists, and people that had creative vision, and be able to get that from your camera onto film, onto prints, and into, the portfolios of models and into magazines. So for me, the 1990s were, I got into photography just at the time where this whole supermodel things was starting, and the girls looked just stunning and beautiful, and there was still elegance and class. And then all of a sudden, this whole waif, heroin chic kind of look, the emaciated girl started to come in, and to me, that started to lose the luster of why I loved fashion and, taking pictures of beautiful people in beautiful locations. There was almost a sadness coming into fashion photography at that time, and it started to lose its luster for me. So I kind of took a step away from fashion at that point, and I started working for a couple of photographers who were doing a lot of stock photography. And to me, that all of a sudden was a way that, again, I could be my own boss. I could take the pictures that I wanted to take. If I wanted to take pictures of happy people doing fun things, I could do that. And that, to me, was much more appealing. I got a chance to shoot, everything from kids to, people who were 50, 60, 70 plus. And that, to me, was more of a challenge than just shooting pretty people. It was a chance to shoot regular people, where we'd cast all sorts of friends, family, friends of friends. We'd do street castings. We'd hold castings in the studio to find people to come in and play all sorts of roles. And to me, that was a lot of fun. Not only was it, taking a step away from professionals, you got a chance to photograph people and make them feel like they were special too, and giving them a chance to look as good as they possibly, or perhaps ever looked in photographs, and then, give them not just pictures, but pay them for the privilege of taking their pictures too. So it was a really fun period of my photography career. And then I started to go down to Mexico a couple of times a year to be able to shoot, bigger productions for a few weeks at a time. And I would do everything from, again, taking pictures of little kids, which I'm really happy I'm not doing anymore, because the old saying is never shoot kids and animals, especially if you want to retain your sanity. And when you're under the gun and under deadlines and trying to find things that are, going to work properly during the course of a day, kids and animals, not such a good idea. But Mexico was fun, and it gave me my first sense of travel, and what the future could bring in terms of, being on the road and being a photographer. So I had a chance to travel all over in Mexico, and be able to even get down to Costa Rica a few times and do that kind of shooting. That was fun. And the more I did that, the more I started to enjoy being away from home to be doing the kind of photography that I was doing. And then at the end, the 2008 period, when the whole world was facing economic hardships and the banking and housing crisis hit, the agency that I was working with, Jupiter Images, got sold to Getty Images, and the whole dynamic of how photography was being done, especially in the stock field, just completely changed. I lost my contract along with everybody else who was working with Jupiter Images at the time, and it was time to move on and find something else, because the whole way that Getty was working with their photographers certainly did not have that same sense of respect back and forth between photographers and agency that we did previously with agencies like Corbis and with Jupiter Images. So the first step is often the toughest when starting something new. And after deciding that I was going to leave stock photography, I really didn't know what it was that I was going to do. But I did have the sense that if I didn't do something that I had a passion for, or a want to try something to be able to create a life that would be exciting for me, I'd probably look back later on in life and have deep regrets, and nobody wants that. So as the quote says here, if you want something in your life that you've never had, you'll have to do something you've never done. And at that point, I was 40 years old, and I'd never traveled all that much outside of North America. And here it was. I wanted to be a travel photographer. In fact, I'd spoken to the people at Jupiter about working with them on a new travel division that they were going to be putting together, and they liked my work enough that they said that they would give me a crack at doing some of that work for them. And that never happened because of the sale, and it was time to see that could I do this on my own. And I took the leap of faith and decided that I would hit the road, and the best place to do it with a little bit of a comfort zone is doing it in your own country. So I went to Banff and Jasper National Parks here in Canada, out in the province of Alberta, which is some of the most beautiful locations in our country and even the world, I'd say. I was just fascinated with the absolute stunning landscapes that existed out there. And this is one of those photos that was from that first trip, and gave me a little bit more confidence when I came back and saw the kind of quality that I could come out with, and getting better at Photoshop, getting better even just at pure photography in a new field, was something that made me feel really excited. So I had lost a couple of friends, or actually a friend's mom who I was close with, and a very close friend of mine, to cancer that year as well. And being in a peaceful location like this allowed me to do a lot of contemplating and figuring out what it was that I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And the more I thought about it, the more I really wanted to hit the road and see if I could do something in a brand new way with photography. And that's one of the beautiful things about photography, is it opens up all sorts of opportunities for you, because there's so many different aspects of photography. If you can be a child photographer, you can be a food photographer, you can be an automotive photographer, you can be a sports photographer, you can be a wedding photographer, or, as I wanted to be, you can be a travel photographer. So the first big trip that I did was hitting Europe, and I went for 5 weeks, and I went to Paris, Barcelona, Milan, Rome, and Florence. And on the very first day of that first big trip, in order to start building my travel photography portfolio, I was in Paris, and I came across Notre Dame Cathedral, and it was around Christmas time, so there was a lot of hustle and bustle out in the streets, and ideally the best time to be able to take pictures is around sunset or sunrise, and I came to the cathedral a little bit late that night, and it still looked rather beautiful and very Gothic in the darkness and all that, but in front of the church there was a big Christmas tree that was being uncrated, and I decided to go into the church to see if I could take some pictures inside. And I learned from that moment on that using a tripod anywhere, especially inside historic locations, is a big no-no. And they basically escorted me out of the cathedral. And I left and was feeling a little bit dejected because there wasn't a really great angle that I could take without a ton of people in front of the church or with other obstructions that were blocking the view. And so I was walking across this bridge and turned around, put my tripod down, said, what the heck? I'll take one last shot that day before heading back to my hotel. And I'm really glad I did, because that ended up being a cover of National Geographic about 3 years later. And, again, you can never expect this, but the very first day of the very first trip that I took in order to build my travel portfolio, I ended up getting a shot that landed on the cover of National Geographic. So that gave me even more confidence and excitement to be able to continue doing this kind of a thing. But it did take a few years to find out that would actually happen. So learning what it was that I wanted to do was great, but again, part of learning about how to be a better photographer made me also learn how to be a better person. And that meant taking chances, being confident, trusting that I was going to make good and bad decisions. But then, to make those decisions and to make those mistakes, you have to step out of that comfort zone. And every time you take chances in life, every time that you believe in yourself and push yourself to further limits, that really is where the magic happens. And in a career that has had super highs and super lows, every time that I've decided to take a chance and push myself to somewhere where it was uncomfortable or challenging, it's always paid off in the long run. They say that lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, but the funny thing is, a few years later, I was again in Italy and taking pictures in one of my favorite cities in Italy, in Florence. And I actually had some business promos printed up that had that first cover of National Geographic on it. And I was walking around the city and asking different hotels and buildings if I could access their rooftop in order to see if I could take a picture of this spectacular cathedral. Finally, I did come across a building that allowed me, but I went to the top and it wasn't so spectacular. And the manager of that 5-star hotel pointed me to this really rundown, less than, I'd say, 3-star hotel a few blocks away, and said, go see them there and tell them I sent you and they'll let you go up. And they did. And I got onto their balcony and I got this really, really cool view. And in the end, that also ended up being a cover of National Geographic. So it was kind of fun to see that, again, because of that first cover I had and showing that to other people, they allowed me to be able to go and get access to different places. And again, it's building that confidence, finding a way to be able to get to the vantage points that allow you to take the best pictures. And I would never do that before. I'd always been, afraid of my shadow, and never having that kind of belief that people would be willing to let me, use their premises or just be nice to me. I'd always be very quiet and shy. And I thought that doesn't open too many doors. So in the end, I've changed my tune and decided that if I'm going to be on the road, especially when I'm alone, that's the time that you can be anybody you want and the best version of yourself. And by that, opening up doors and talking to people, and getting to meet all sorts of interesting, fun, nice people, that to me is one of the absolute treats and joys that travel photography has opened up to me. It's allowed me to develop relationships and meet some of the best people I ever have had a chance to meet in my life. And from that cathedral, at another point in Florence, I was able to get this shot. And this particular photo is a very special moment for me. I ended up, talking to some people at the top of the dome that you just saw on a very slushy, icy morning, and getting a chance to get this shot, which it was the first time that it had snowed, I think, in about 25 years in Florence. And there was maybe less than a half dozen people up on the roof at that point. And to have this kind of a view all to yourself, and then meet a nice couple up there who I had a really wonderful conversation with. And I remember at the end of our conversation, we had, a nice personal back and forth about some tragedies that we had faced in our lives. And it was touching to see that you can open up to people like this in a place like that, with a view like this, on a morning like that. And it all culminated at the end with us having a big three-way hug. And we never kept in touch afterwards, but it's going to be a travel memory of a lifetime for me. And this is, for that reason, one of my absolute favorite photos that I've ever taken. And it's the memories that the photographs bring that make them special. And there's, the story that exists for the photographer. And I think all of you who take photos can understand that. You take photos because you want to create something beautiful. You want to stir people's souls. But at the same time, those photos bring back wonderful memories when you look back at them. And you can take a million photos in your life, and each one of those is going to have some kind of a trigger, some kind of a memory. And it doesn't even have to be the best photograph that brings back the best memories. It's just the fact that there's that trigger in that photograph that brings those memories back to you. It's heartwarming. As I continued with my travels throughout Italy, I was finding out new ways in order to be able to find the best vantage points to take photographs, and sometimes that required being a little bit sneaky. For example, this image of the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, which isn't a very popular church, but it's one of the most beautiful interiors of any church that I did see in Italy. And one of the cool things about this church, at least on that day that I had visited, was the fact that there's no chairs or pews. So you got a chance to see the stunning marble floors, and the light was just radiant in there that day. But again, I had a tripod and they wouldn't let me use it. So what I did was I ended up just using my camera bag, my backpack, as a brace in order to be able to put my camera on that and get a chance to be stable enough to be able to get this photograph, which required several shots, which I blended together in Photoshop afterwards in order to be able to get the dynamic range. So again, it's about learning how to work with the things, the rules, sometimes bending them a little bit. Sometimes you have to sneak a tripod, quickly take a shot and move on. But you try and follow the rules wherever you go.
Ken, this is Chuck. We do have a question in the chat box, and I encourage others of you to ask a question of our speaker tonight. Ken, the question is as follows. When you refer to super highs and super lows, are you referring to financial, artistic, or something else?
Yes, yes, and yes. So anyone who's worked in the arts, I think will be able to relate to, yes, the financial highs and lows. There's, for example, that year in 2008, let's take that for example, it was dreadful. I went from making a six-figure salary to probably making around $15,000 that year. And it was a year of reinvention, but it was also a kick in the butt. And it was something that allowed me to discover what it was that I was going to do with the rest of my life. Personal highs and lows within photography as well. Sure, there's been, moments where I've literally thought about giving it up, and, we'd be happy I didn't do that in the long run. It can be a lonely field as well, and including in some of the best places and times that I've had in my photography career, it can be really lonely because you do work alone, especially in travel. I worked without an assistant. I was on the road alone for weeks at a time, and oftentimes in places where I don't speak the language. So that can be challenging, but it can be, it's your attitude on all these things that make it or break it for you. So, it's about having the best disposition, the best attitude about these things. The money thing, that's a tough one. How do you get out of it? You have to be smart enough to have had, some money put aside. Your career is going to be a roller coaster if you work in the arts. I'm sure that that's the same thing for whether you're an artist in photography, or if you're an actor, or if you're even, people who work as athletes. They can have great years. You hear often of really young athletes that get drafted and last a year in the big leagues, and then they're gone because they had a catastrophic injury or something. You have to be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best. So there's been, a lot of highs and lows. But I think that if you don't know what the depths of the lowest of the low can be for you, you will never appreciate as much what the highest of the highs can be. So I'll take the roller coaster ride. So this shot of the Hungarian Opera House was granted to me because I worked with the tourism board over there. And it was, again, one of those moments where having a place like this all to myself, having had, the guts to approach the tourism board and, and really get after them to see the places that I wanted to see and have the doors opened up to me. This shot, literally, I remember being at the far end on the balcony where you see those three seats at the far end. That's where the president will sit. And there was a guy sweeping on the stage, and you could hear every swish with such clarity in this opera house. The acoustics were so beautiful. And then just to look at the ceiling and look at the symmetry of the seats and the all the gold gilding and everything that went involved with this. My biggest regret was not being there during a time when there was going to be an actual opera that night that I could have attended, because they did invite me to stay, but it just didn't work out because it was going to be a few days after I'd be leaving Budapest. But these kinds of things, getting special access, my God, that really showed me that, working not just at being a good photographer, but being good at approaching people and offering your services and trying to find a way to get those doors open to you is what also helps make for very special photographs, including something like this. During the course of my time, before I started working with Discovery Photo Tours and running tours, I worked for several tourism boards, including the tourism board in Jordan. And I'd probably been to Jordan at least 7-8 times now. And getting special access to places like this. This is not the most famous of the sites in Petra. It's one that you actually have to walk about 1,000 steps up in order to be able to see. And at this point in time of the day or night, as it is, it's closed. And we get special permission with Discovery Photo Tours to be able to stay there as long as we want all night once the site has been closed to the public. And we actually get a catered meal, dinner served to us under the stars as we're taking these photographs. And again, connections. It's just wonderful to know that if you work hard for people, they will in turn work hard for you as well. And then you get a chance to have this kind of a spectacular view that so few people have even ever witnessed, let alone photographed. This to me, this is what blogging allowed me to do. This is what being proficient at social media allowed me to do. While I was an influencer, quote unquote, that word didn't really exist back in 10 years ago. That's exactly what this was the beginning of the influencers in social media and blogging, that we were the ones that opened that pathway to all these people now who have millions and millions of followers and get a chance to do their kind of thing now. So I'm really excited for the younger generation now to come in and take the reins and do that kind of a thing with their photography and their social media prowess and get those doors open to them and see the world and do spectacular things. It's a really cool time in the history of photography, but also in all sorts of other artistic domains where social media can open up tons of doors for us. So this is the other scene in Petra where, again, we get a chance to get in early as they're setting these candles up in front of the treasury. And it's, again, it's just one of those special moments in life when I have people, literally hugging each other when we're in these places, and we have them all to ourselves, and we get a chance to photograph them and see this. Whereas just, maybe 30 minutes later, there'll be several hundred people here mulling around, making noise, and it's just not the same as having these places all to yourself.
Ken, inadvertently, you've asked or answered a question that came up from Michael. He was wondering how the heck you got all these beautiful pictures with no people crowding in the foreground. And he wondered if you're editing them out or, as you just mentioned, shooting at unusual hours.
Yeah, great question. So I think that there's several facets to the answer, and one is most certainly getting up very early in the morning, and sunrise is going to be your best friend. While sunset is also beautiful light, you're certainly going to get tons of people in your shots at sunset in most places, whereas at sunrise, if you get up at 4:30 and you place yourself as the sun is rising, which is a great segue into this next shot, that allows you to get those shots without anybody in them. Yes, special permissions, getting a chance to have nobody in your shot, like the shot from Petra, this one as well. I mean, this is just because we're the only ones there and there's nobody else allowed in there. The same thing for here. And then, once in a while, you'll see some of the shots that I have spent hours photoshopping people out. It's rare that I'll have that kind of patience in order to really do that to the nth degree, but sometimes the shot is really great and I want to make sure that I get it without people, because today, I mean, it would have been nice to be photographing in the 1920s, 30s, 40s when, all the women wore nice dresses and the men wore fedoras and trench coats. And, it's just not the case anymore, where people wear bike shorts and fluorescent t-shirts and cowboy hats and things that just don't fit in the places that you're photographing. So I like to just make the photos more pure in that sense. Does that answer the question?
Well, there's no further comments, so I think it did. Michael says yes, thank you.
All right, cool. So let's see. Getting all that experience in the places like Jordan and Hungary and Italy and others allowed me to start getting the contacts that I needed, and I started, going to travel blogging conferences and meeting people who are not just writers but tour operators and tourism boards, and it just was such a nice dynamic. The people that work in the travel industry are really looking for collaborations and for ways to be able to celebrate the places that they're offering their tours in, or the tourism boards that they're so proud of their countries. And in order for me to be able to come and do the kind of photography I do, and not just that, but also bring other people who are going to come and do photography, this is a really nice aspect for these tourism boards and tour companies to also get extra kind of showcasing of those locations, because people will continuously share on social media their images and with friends and family, and talk about the places and encourage other people to visit there. So this shot is actually the very first shot that we take on the Italy tour that I run, from the very first location at the Roman Forum. So we get up nice bright and early on day one, like I say, around 4:30 or so, and we have expert guides that work with us, that walk us through Rome from our hotel all the way over to this location. It's probably about a 40-minute walk. And along the way, we stop and we take a few photos, but this is really the highlight, starting at this location. And again, we're at a vantage point where I've scouted these places. I know where to go. I know where there's barriers. I know where there's, so this is all gated off until a certain point. So you're not going to get anybody until opening hours. And then even then, you're not going to be able to get that kind of glowing sunrise light even 20 minutes after the shot was taken. So you've got to be prepared to get to these places and utilize the fact that most people are inherently lazy when they travel, and they're not going to get up that early. So us as photographers, we found that one exceptional trick is just get up early, get there when nobody's there, and you also get a chance to have some of the most beautiful light of the day. So starting the tour company was exciting for me, and one of the things that I loved so much about it wasn't just that I was getting a chance to start a new company and start doing the photography and sharing that, but it was the inspiration that not just myself, but the other photographers that co-led with me in all these destinations, that the inspiration that they were able to give to the amateur photographers that we took with us. And I've been blessed by seeing photographers that have been with me on 5, 6, 7 trips, and seeing the progression from where they started to where they ended up, to the point where they rival the work that I do and the other photographers that lead. And I'm so proud of those people for being so passionate and so devoted to what they do, and so talented and dedicated to learning the skills and technology when it comes to photography. So learning not just about cameras, but about computers and software and Photoshop and all the plugins that you can use, and the techniques that go along with blending your photography with digital manipulation. It's just so much fun to see those people have become super proficient at it, but also at the same time to see those people who just, even if they take pictures and never edit them, just because they love photography and they love traveling. Everyone uses photography in their own way, and there's no real right way to do it. It's just, you do it because it stirs your soul.
On that point, there is another question, and it's about feelings and emotions mixed in with experiences, and how they may alter your perception of a photograph. And Craig Underwood wonders, do you work to try to remove your emotions from a photograph to objectively evaluate it? What's the mindset as you're taking a great image?
Actually, it's the exact opposite of that. Emotion is important. I'm an emotional creature. We all are. And, and again, great segue into this shot. This picture just, it moves me. This is as close to midnight in Iceland in the summertime. And that was my first trip to Iceland. And it's hard not to get emotional about these kinds of things. And seeing something for the first time, seeing that kind of light at that time of night, having, again, this place all to ourselves, which you pretty much can't do anymore because Iceland's become so popular. But no, I want to convey emotion. I want to convey a sense of awe and majesty to the places that I photograph. I want people to be inspired to want to go visit those places. And I hope I'm doing my job, well enough to convince a few people to want to step maybe a little bit out of their comfort zone and hit the road and see these places and take their own versions of these photographs and of other places. It's important to have some sense of feeling to the photographs for me. And I think that that's with any art. If art can stir an emotion in you, then it's doing its job. I think the worst thing that you can feel with regards to one of my photographs, or I'd say anybody whose art, would be ambivalence and, you know, apathy. I'd rather you hate something I do than, you know, just say meh, whatever. It's important. I think some of the most important art pieces in history have really conveyed strong, deep emotions on both ends of the spectrum, and that makes for great debate, great discussions about art. But in my sense, you know, I'm not looking to anger anyone or anything like that. I'm just really looking to make people feel like, wow, I'd like to be there. And I like to think that too of my own work. Like when I look at it, it's like, my God, you know, after a year of not being on the road, I'd sure like to be standing in front of these waterfalls right now and looking at this. That would be a nice feeling. So as I went along, working with the different tourism boards and making new contacts, I started to run more tours. And Iceland was, again, Italy, Iceland, Jordan were the first ones that I started to do. And getting a chance to see things that were so completely different and foreign than anything I've ever seen before. And even though I'm from Canada, we have some pretty brutal winters. The winters are actually much milder in Iceland than they are here, where I'm from. But what you can see in terms of nature and landscape are so completely alien, including this. And I love this shot just for the simple reason that there's no scale to it. And you say, you know, you don't have people in your photos. So this one, I always challenge people to think like, okay, what do you think this is and how big do you actually think it is? So yes, this is an ice cave in Iceland, and there's several of them during the course of the year that they open up to allow people to come in and visit. But this is actually in the ice cave looking up through a borehole that they made. And so it's tiny. It's probably as wide as just maybe a little bigger than a basketball. And yet I could see, you know, putting someone standing at the very end of it, it could look like a gigantic tunnel, which there actually was if you just walked about 20, 30 meters to the left of this place. And you could literally walk by this hole without even looking up and never have noticed it in this ice cave. So it's the unexpected, stopping, looking around, taking the time to savor your location, not rushing through things that are really going to open your eyes to finding those real treasures of shots that, you know, everyone is going to be able to go to this location and see Kirkjufell and the waterfalls. But not too many people are going to have had a chance to see something like this because the next year it's not going to be there. It just won't exist. It's a moment in time that I was able to capture that makes me really happy I got it, because it's a unique photograph that very, very few other people got. I think maybe 2 or 3 other people on that tour that I had actually did stop and see it, and we only noticed it on the way out, so I couldn't even tell too many people about it. And the next day, this cave actually closed because there was so much water coming into it that it became a hazard. You know, again, making your own rules a little bit about finding a way to get your photographs. This is one of the most spectacular sunsets I've ever seen in my life. And the photograph doesn't just not, it doesn't exaggerate it. It's not embellished in Photoshop. In fact, I had to tone it down because the colors were so dramatic and so intense. And I love that. There's ramparts, you know, old medieval walls that surround the city of Dubrovnik, and they open them up to the public. You can walk around them up until, unfortunately, sunset, when they close it down. And the best vantage points to be able to get the photographs are up there. So I was there with a couple of other photographers, and we worked kind of as a team to distract the security people in order to be able to have them follow one of us to say, okay, it's time to go, and allow the other 2 to take the photographs, and then we'd switch and let them do that. So I think we got about an extra 30 minutes there, and didn't make any friends with the security guards, but we sure did get a nice sunset view and some great photos at the end. Yeah, everywhere you go, you're going to find different kinds of magic. There's ways to find it by just being open and walking around through cities and not taking public transport, and making sure that you keep your eyes open and look up, look down, look all around, take side streets, look for the unexpected. And then there's just doing research. This is not like a hidden treasure. This is a Plitvice National Park in Croatia, and it's very famous for its landscape of hundreds and hundreds of these waterfalls that just come out of the rocks and the vegetation, and it's absolutely stunning. And then it's a matter of just trying to figure out an itinerary, trying to get a good guide who can help you get through locations and translate for you, and people with their own connections there, working with tourism boards, working with local tour operators, finding ways to be able to work even with local photographers, contacting them ahead of time. If you do your research on things like 500px or Instagram, and contact the people whose work that you've liked, and if you know that you're going to a location, send a nice message to someone and say, hey, where did you take that shot? Would you be willing to share that with me? And if they live in that area, offer to buy them a drink or a coffee or lunch if they're going to be able to help you. And you never know, you might just make a friend.
Ken, we've had a question, and Doug Talbot's been waiting patiently. He wonders what camera bodies and lenses primarily do you use to take your photographs. And just a note for you, it seemed that you've been on the sunset picture until just a moment ago. Yes, you've positioned forward. Okay, great. So the question is about camera bodies and lenses.
So as I was mentioning earlier on, I've had a strong affiliation with Fujifilm for the last 6-7 years, I'd say. So I use everything from X Pro cameras to the X-T3. I haven't gone anything over and above that to this point, and I've used the GFX quite a bit as well. And I like the smaller cameras simply for the fact that they really do allow you to travel at a lighter weight. And the lenses, I tend to stick with zooms and not primes because they give me greater flexibility. And it allows me to take fewer lenses with me on the road. And I've learned that over the years, that less is more, because just the weight is brutal. I have severe herniated discs in my neck and lower back. And so at this point, I can't even carry that much, especially if I'm trekking all day long. And the quality of the lenses that Fujifilm makes is just amazing. And I'll be honest, the other camera manufacturers all make really exceptional cameras these days. I can't think of any camera manufacturer that makes bad cameras. But as a matter of preference, and you're going to have to stick with one system at some point, I'm a Fujifilm fan, and that's for everything from super wides to the telephotos that they make, and again, all of them are much lighter weight than your standard Nikon, Canon 35 mils. So here's a perfect example of one of those shots where there were people in the photo, and this is again as I was mentioning about Iceland, that the Kirktrufell waterfalls, and even at Petra now, it's really difficult to get these places all to yourself, like where the candles were, because just so many more people are even breaking rules and coming in without permission. And there's just so many more tourists these days. Tourism has just boomed and boomed. It would have been beautiful to be vaccinated a year ago and travel the world where everything would have been completely empty like this, and do a series of photographs. That would have been a dream come true for someone like me. But you have to create that magic for yourself in places like this. And now this, I think, was shot in about 2016. 2020 was the last time I ran a Japan tour, and we could barely get this photograph at this point. This is at sunset. It's a very popular spot now, and there's literally about 50 photographers waiting to get this shot. along with us. And so I know that this is going to happen to some degree, but I didn't know it was going to happen to that degree. We got there maybe an hour and a half before and camped out just because we knew that there was going to be a challenge to find the spot to be able to keep it to ourselves and not have 20 other photographers in front of us. So this required photoshopping out a van. This required photoshopping out 2 or 3 people. And today, it would be even more challenging to do that. So, there's always going to be the next place to be able to find that's going to be exciting to photograph. And just because you can't get this particular shot easily anymore, that's what makes it fun, is it's a challenge. And if you're willing to spend hours at a place to get a shot, that shows your dedication. And if you're not, you can still get a nice shot. It's not going to be perhaps people free, but does it need to be? That's just me. I would like it to be, but it doesn't have to be. There's things. I have the 3 P's of photography. It's persistence, planning, and Photoshop. They all seem to pay off in the long run. Japan is one of those places that I absolutely love to photograph, and this is a good example of another time of day, blue hour. Sunset, sunrise are great, but both blue hours in the morning and in the evenings give you these lovely blue tinted skies, and especially when you have golden lights in buildings. And here, even within the cherry blossoms, you have some nice glowing lights. And when you have that amber contrasting with the blue, those are the kinds of shots I absolutely love to take. And here's another really good example of that, just getting after sunset, blue hour. It's absolutely stunning what kind of contrast you can get. And so, yes, here's one shot where I literally do have hundreds of people in the shot, but they're small enough that it doesn't really matter. And this is a shot of one of the most famous temples, Kiyomizu-dera in Kyoto. However, it's been under scaffolding. And this is another one of those challenges. And so, again, planning ahead. And if you want to get these kinds of photographs and you've seen them wherever, online, through friends, always make sure that you find out if especially historic sites are going to be under renovation, scaffolding, or any kind of repair, because that can absolutely ruin a shot for you and a planned day. Whereas this, for 3 years, I think, had been under scaffolding after this, and we weren't able to get a shot. So I had to plan the tours literally differently around that in order to be able to find an alternative to this. I think it's open now again, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in its new shining glory. I'm sure they've done a nice job. Yeah, another nice quote from Thoreau. And this is one of the points that I was trying to make earlier. I'm not a photojournalist. I'm not looking to be offering a realistic view of a place. I'm looking to pay tribute to that place. And it's what I see, not necessarily of that place, but what I see in that place, what it brings out in me, what it makes me feel. And that's always super important to me. And this is also not just with the places that I photograph, but with the people that I photograph. And so this is another reason why I really like using the Fujifilm cameras, is they're discreet, they're small, they're unobtrusive, they're not going to get in people's faces. People are not going to feel intimidated by having a camera pointed at them, and you're going to be able to get nice candid shots like this and have people feel at ease, and that's really nice. It almost looks like you're a lesser of a photographer, or less professional of a photographer, the smaller the camera you have. And that's fine by me. I don't want to be carrying around a big honking thing that is going to be intimidating to people that I want to photograph. There's a subtlety to be able to get candid photographs of people. And what you get a chance to see, and again, this is using letting the technology, letting the smaller cameras allow me to be able to travel lighter and handhold, and got me back into photographing people, because I really wasn't doing it too much for many years, more concentrating on landscape and historic sites and cityscapes and things of that nature. And when I started to go to Asia, Vietnam and Myanmar especially, those places really inspired me to want to photograph people, because there's still an authenticity to those people. There's still a reality to their daily existence that is ancient and beautiful. And there's a wisdom that these people have that we're going to lose very soon. And that's a tragedy. So being able to be someone who's able to capture these kinds of photos for posterity and for history's sake, it means a lot to me. And you know, I hope that people who travel to these places also feel that, you know, they're doing that, and that you can share these photos with your friends, your family, your children, your grandchildren, and tell them the stories of what you've seen, and how things are changing rapidly, but yet there's still these people that live literally like this today, and I don't think that'll last for too many more decades. One of the things, and you just saw that picture, that, you know, without the magazine cover, and it's learning about photography, and especially if you want to do this and have any success in editorial photography, is take different versions of the same photograph. Do horizontals, do landscapes, do, you know, vertical and horizontal, so that if ever you do get a chance to have a layout in a magazine, and an editor wants to put a montage together, they may choose a photo simply because it fits better horizontally or vertically, as opposed to how great the photo is. And sometimes that's a bit sad, but that's the reality of editorial. The same thing even for commercial work. A lot of advertising or magazine covers are going to have a lot of graphics on them. You need to put negative space on those photographs. So allow yourself to zoom out a little bit and allow there to be more negative space, so that an editor has a chance to use your photograph for a commercial or editorial purpose in the future. It's a great way to also hone your skills a little bit more by learning that technique of letting less be more within the frame. It doesn't always have to be saturated with 100% busyness in the photograph. You can actually have a lot of negative space and still have a really important photograph that tells a nice story. Again, learning about the cultures and meeting the people, and just stopping in the streets. These are literally the way people dress in Vietnam. And I was blown away with this, that not only do they dress like this, but there's a pride to it. The lady, the Hmong lady on the left, just, we're standing in front of her home, and it's dirt floors in the home, and they spent hours and hours and hours a day embroidering the clothes that they have, and other tapestries and things like that, which you can literally buy for next to nothing there. And it's I encourage anyone who gets a chance to travel and see these things and see the people selling these kinds of things, to not bargain with them, but in fact pay more than what they ask for. These people sincerely need the help. Whereas if you can afford to travel to these places, you certainly don't need an extra $10 or even $100 or even $1. I've seen people haggle for $1 with people that are looking literally to, you know, feed their families. And we're so privileged as Westerners to be able to go to these places and get a chance to witness how people live like they did literally 100, 200, 300 years ago. There's no big difference. But there's also a kindness and a gentleness to these people that doesn't exist here. Like, if I like to tell people that if you go into somebody's home here and photograph them without their permission, or if you just stop and ask if you could, what do you think the answer would be? But we seem to have this sense of that should be our privilege when we travel. So always do things with kindness. Always offer to do something nice for these people who are, you know, kind enough to pose for you. And even if they aren't posing, you take a candid, and let's say it's a street vendor or something, go and buy something from them, even if you're not going to use it. That's going to make their day, and you know, maybe feed their family for that day. another example of this is, I don't even remember what this woman was selling, but I do remember when I looked in her basket, I couldn't believe that she was actually selling whatever it was she was, because who would want this? She's obviously incredibly poor, and yet look at the detail in her clothing, and there's not a single stain on that shirt. There's a pride in her, and there's a story in every single line in her face, and there's a beauty in that, and that, to me, again, if a photograph, if a person, if a place can stir my soul, then again, I want to be the person taking that photograph of that person or place. Every photograph has a story too, and one that I think is kind of cute and funny is the one about the girl on the right. And I remember someone telling me, oh, you took this photograph of this poor girl who's sitting there. She's obviously sad. She's got a scraped leg, and she's obviously really poor. And how do you feel taking that picture of someone who's so underprivileged? And I just thought to myself, and I chuckled, because I know the story of that photograph, which really is the reason she's sitting there with a sad look on her face was because a minute before I took the photo, she was running around with her brother, and they were play fighting, and he pulled her hair, and as kids do, she went and sat and pouted for about 30 seconds before they started playing all over again. That's the real story behind the picture. The story that you want to make up about the picture is whatever the story is that you're going to make up. And it's not right or wrong. It's just, again, it's a story. And if I can tell you the story, that's one thing. But I think that just her expression is story enough for you to sit there for a moment and be enthralled with her look. And the same with the gaze of the little girl to the left, who was sitting just outside her schoolhouse. And again, she looks perhaps a little bit sad, but a minute or two before, her whole class was holding hands and singing and dancing together, and she's just a little bit tuckered out and taking a break. And we saw this as we were hiking. We went on about a 20-30 kilometer hike that day, and just took one camera, one lens, and just had a blast photographing the local people, and walked into schools, and they let us. And again, I'm trying to think like what school in North America or Europe would allow you to walk in and start photographing children without permission. But this is what's still available to us, and we should take advantage of doing that when we can, and sharing these pictures. And again, if you can leave a donation for the school afterwards, even if it's $1, even if it's $5, do it. You don't know how much good you're going to be doing.
Ken, there's a question about, I know a number of these images are from Asia, the last series, of course, Vietnam. Larry Ash is wondering if you've worked in South America.
That's actually one of the places that I've spent the least amount of time in. I've actually only been to Argentina, and that was just on my way to Antarctica. So I have not spent much time there. It's something that I'd like to rectify. There's something that intimidates me a little bit about South America, and I'm not sure exactly what that is. One of my favorite books of all time is Papillon, which was recently just remade into a film. The original film was with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman in the early 1970s, and it's a story about the penal colony at Devil's Island in Guyana, in French Guyana. And I remember reading that when I was a kid, and I probably read the book at least a half dozen times now. And so that, I think, may have given me my first sense of what South America is all about. And it wasn't a very good impression. It's a big world too, and there's so much to see. And man, I want to go everywhere. There's places in Bolivia I'm dying to go to, places in Peru I really want to see. I would love to spend several weeks just trekking through Patagonia, which looks absolutely spectacular. And let's see if I can do it. I'm hoping this pandemic is over soon. I'm getting vaccinated next Monday, so I'm looking forward to hitting the road somewhere this year, and maybe that should be one of the first places I go, because I have not been to South America very much. So the reason I put the your one decision away from a totally different life was because I made another big decision in my life in 2016, and that was to move to the United States. And I'm really happy I did that. It was for several reasons. One, mostly because I wanted to take a big chance in what I think is a country that, like no other, allows you the opportunity to be the best version of you that you can be and reward you for that. The US celebrates entrepreneurship like no other country I know. And I wanted to see if I had what it took to be able to make it in the US. And, you know, like the old New York, New York, it's like, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And this is one of the first pictures that I took right after moving to the US. Now, I ended up in Connecticut, which is a good hour outside of New York, but on September 11th every year, they do this beautiful tribute, and they put those two lights that beacon up into the sky. And from the New Jersey side, you're able to see this beautiful view of the skyline of Manhattan, and it's touching. I remember getting the news early morning on September 11th when the tragedy of the plane striking the Twin Towers happened, and I had very good friends who lived and worked in New York, and obviously tried to get in touch with them and see if they were okay. And that episode in American history just showed me how resilient, how tough, how caring Americans are, and that when the chips are down, how they're there for each other. And it made me feel like that's a place that I could call home. And I really do feel privileged to have spent, you know, several years there. I had to come back for family reasons to Canada, and I still probably would have been living in the US, but no matter what, I'm always going to look back on my time in the US with extremely, extremely fond memories. One of the things that I think has touched me more than anything else in terms of what kind of love and passion I've developed for travel is when I started going to Tanzania on safaris and then running safaris there for the last several years. I can't even put properly into words the kind of sentiment and feeling that I get when I look at these beautiful creatures. And I know, sadly, that we may be one of the last generations to really be witnessing them in the even still small amounts that exist in nature today. Their habitat is being destroyed. Poaching is still an incredibly tragic problem that happens. The encroachment of farmland into the natural habitat is something that is really sad. And so in order to be able to get there and witness this myself, I think it's my responsibility to try and do more of this. And that's really something that I'm going to concentrate on a lot more once we're able to travel again, and once I'm able to start running my tours again. Is Africa is going to be, I think, right at the very top of where I want to offer more experiences. It's a continent that's full of diversity and beautiful people, but the animals, to me, is just seriously one of those things that has moved me like nothing else. And I want to do what I can in the future as well to see what I can do to help preserve their habitat, so that generations from now can also enjoy what I'm enjoying so much these days. This is one of my all-time favorite photographs that I was able to take. It's a moment where, again, early in the morning, and this doesn't just apply to taking pictures of landscapes or cityscapes. It's some of the best things, no matter what, happen at the early moments of the morning when the sun is just coming out. And that includes the wildlife. The wildlife is still and quiet and just starting to wake up, and they're a little quieter and softer, and They're not running around as much. And we were driving into the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, which is the world's largest unflooded caldera. And this majestic lion just popped his head out of the shrubbery for about 20 seconds. And I fired off probably a dozen shots rapid fire. And this, I think, was one of the only two that was in focus. It was low light. This is probably around 3200 ISO. I opened up, to have the widest aperture possible on my lens, and I'm just so blessed to have been able to get this shot. It just feels like a ghost appeared for a moment and shined his beautiful light on us, and we had 4 people in the vehicle with us, and at the end all of our jaws were just hanging down and hoping that he'd come back, but he never did. It was still a great day the rest of the day, but it's a great way to start the day. When you get a chance to see nature like in person instead of through a National Geographic or BBC special, I tell you, you'll never, ever, ever forget it. And one of the most incredible things that I've ever witnessed in my life is the great migration that happens with the wildebeest and zebra in Tanzania, and especially when they're crossing the Mara River. Now, this is one shot that I took just before they start traversing the river, and the symmetry and the separation between the two animals and the dust storm created and all that, just to me spoke volumes about the tenacity of these animals and the wanting to get to the other side. You always think of why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? Well, why do these animals cross the Mara River that's crocodile infested to get to the other side? And that's really the only reason. There's greener pastures on the other side, and the migration continues no matter what. And you can see literally during the course of a crossing anywhere from several dozen to tens of thousands of wildebeest crossing for hours and hours and hours at a time. It's something that's absolutely undescribable. You have to see it, you have to smell it, you have to taste the grit of the sand and the dust in your teeth, and then you just have to step back and feel so blessed to have been able to witness it. And I'll never, ever forget this, and that's, I think, the first place I'm heading back to as soon as I possibly can is back to Tanzania. Night and day, these are other tips for trying to get to the same location. Go and see a place during the night, go and see it during the day. What you see during the day is going to be completely different than what you see during the day. This is actually our hotel that we stay at in Norway on our photo tour, and makes for a very easy trek to get to the bridge where we're standing on to get this photograph. And during the day, it's equally as beautiful, but just completely different in terms of its perspective. But there sure is something spectacular about catching the northern lights, along with the contrast of the man-made lights on the bottom, and then seeing the reflection of the green in the ocean itself. Now, it's freezing cold while we're doing this. We're well above the Arctic Circle, but no pain, no gain. So this is where I'd just like to talk quickly about the importance of filtration. And for me, there's only really 2 filters I use anymore, and that's going to be neutral density and circular polarizing filters. And the reason why so many of the other filters have come and gone is simply because of what you can do magically in Photoshop these days. And that is nothing that you can reproduce in Photoshop. I mean, you can't reproduce what you can create with neutral density filters in Photoshop. So the softness of the water, if you want to get soft clouds in the sky that streak. But to me, the nicest part of the neutral density filters is really what you can do with seascapes, lakes, and any kind of river, any kind of water. It just gives this subtlety, this softness, and this is a prime example of that. So as I said early in the presentation, Format High Tech is the company that I work with. They make, just to me, the absolute best neutral density filters out there, and they're color cast free, which is of paramount importance when you're doing this, because it's almost impossible to get rid of a really terrible color cast that a lot of neutral density filters give you, especially those that are the ones that you can basically zoom in and out of, that give you the different grades depending upon they're called variable neutral density filters, and they just don't work nearly as well as the ones that are standard, simple, like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 stop. You can get up to 16 stop neutral density filters with the Format High-Tech filters, which that is another way that you can, even during the middle of the day, get people out of your photographs, because as long as there's motion and movement, if you're taking a photograph that lasts 20 minutes, anything that's moving, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a person or an animal, they won't be in your shot. And that's another great way to be able to utilize the neutral density filters. So I'm going to end on this shot in Slovenia. And again, one of those places that I'd never been to before. I'd never experienced. I'd seen photographs of. I wanted to get specific shots of this really beautiful island that has a church on it in the middle of Lake Bled. And it just wasn't working out because there's so much fog, so much haze. And I walked around and around. I climbed hills that had snow up to my hips. And in the end, I came across a different perspective. And I think that needs to be celebrated too. When we get very much influenced, I think maybe too much influence from looking at other people's photographs and saying that I want to get that exact shot. I want to get that shot. Well, don't always try and get that shot because it's already been done. Get it if you can, if that's important, but then look for variety. Look at what can make it your shot. And this framing to me was a lot of fun to be able to do. It required a little bit of magic afterwards in Photoshop too, with some focus stacking. And that's a fun technique where you can get everything from super close up to all the way to infinity in focus in your photograph. And again, learning how to do these different things, learning how to travel, how to research, how to get a better sense of, when to get up, who to contact, to get permissions. All of these things will help you take better photographs in the future and appreciate the places that you go to as well. And one of the things that I like to say too is the more that you get out there and talk to people, the more opportunities you're going to be able to get, that people are going to open up doors to you, and not just open up doors to getting better photographs, but to making sometimes long-lasting friendships. Well, this is literally the last slide. So thank you. I'll just read off of the slide. I may not have gone where I intended to go, but I think I ended up where I needed to be. And what a beautiful way to be able to look at your life and say that, it's been an interesting road. It's not been what I expected, and sure hasn't. But I love what the result is. I love the places I've been to, the people I've met, and I'm looking forward to doing this for many more years to come. And it's been a really nice privilege to be able to talk to your group tonight. And I'm honored that you sat through a longer presentation than what was expected. So thank you for your patience, and I'm happy to take any and all questions.
Well, we do have a comment from Michael, just reiterating what a fantastic presentation, how inspiring it is, and with thanks. We'll just pause here for a moment to see if any further questions come up. Ken, thank you once more. On behalf of the Photographic Society of Northwest Arkansas, we just couldn't be more honored than to have you speak with us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on a photo tour very soon. Good night, everyone.
Thanks so much.